Hey everybody, what's happening? It's been a couple weeks, probably at least a couple weeks, maybe 3 weeks. Unusual for me. Where have I been? Well, I'm in the middle of as we go into September, we start fall, sort of a full court press for my son. My son's 17 and is senior in high school, and now we're applying to colleges. And this is something where, as much as possible, I think my wife and I want him essentially to drive the bus on this. And he has done a pretty good job of that. And, this is an age where, where you are when you're a sophomore in high school and where you are, then you have a junior year where a lot of growth happens, and then you're a senior. And he's a whole other person in many, many respects. So the growth happens fast and furious, and that's okay. He's done really well at this. He's an artsy kid. He's interested in, he's very good at video editing, and he's very into that. He's very into graphic design and seems to have a talent for that. People tell him that he does. So these areas interest them, and there are certain schools. He has got a good list of schools, so now I'm going to start applying. That process and really drilling down on these individual institutions, how they relate to the greater society, that's something that's been on my mind. And it is reminiscent of what we're going through on some level politically. We're at a state where there's a large segment of the population who no longer essentially believes in society. They don't believe in centralized anything. They want to burn it all down. And, society can function or society doesn't. And when it becomes completely decentralized, we're in a whole other thing. So these things are interestingly related, because I think the things that are most sensitive to those sorts of changes are institutions, right? Institutions, the soil beneath the pillars are at their most sensitive at institutions, right? Shifting sands, not good for institutions. Those pillars can fall. So I'm not one. I am the last person I think you would consider some sort of centrist or institutionalist. I am not. However, I'm way to the left. I like to see the questioning to some degree of some of our ideas and so forth, because that's part of, but within the framework of, I believe in education. I believe in educational systems. I think they need reform and so forth. But all the things that are holding back all that are things coming from the right anyhow. And the assault on institutions is coming from the right, because the right, I think quite correctly, is reaching a tipping point where they sit there and say, we can't still be us. This society is going to get to a point where us being, let's see, how do we put it delicately? Let's not. It's increasingly being difficult to hate gay people and be racist and want a white ethno-state and hold on to every bit of privilege possible in this society. Good God, this is the end of the world. This is and there's a possibility there could be more secularism. Well, the United States was based on secularism, right? We were not founded to be a Christian nation or an anything nation. We were founded to be a secular nation because the founding fathers knew their history, and the age of reason had just happened in the past, 100, 200 years. So they knew the dangers of the history of Europe had been the history of religious wars, and they didn't want anything to. Okay, how do we avoid that? Well, we've got to excise all that from the political state. We need to be a secular country. The French had said that, but they just couldn't implement it. We implemented it a little faster than the French got to it. And then, when you got after the French Revolution, the disaster that was, one of the first things Napoleon did, and this is Napoleonic law, and for all the problems Napoleon had, separating church and state was a big, was going to be secular law, the law of the state, and you could have the church could have its way in the. So, trying to get rid of that, that's what's coming from the right. So that's where I see the threats coming from. And it's interesting to see how all this plays out. But it reminded me of something. It reminded me of this choice, fundamentally that we get to make, or the reaction people have when things, right now things are unsteady. Things are not rock solid, but the society is functioning. Now this may pass, and this move towards, you could tell, I suppose the level of gaslighting, in order to upset the society, in order to make, right, the assault on truth is fundamental. Gaslight everything, make everything, say the craziest thing, and then say, oh, it's obvious that that's the way things should be, right? That has been the right-wing playbook. I think Vivek today, Ramaswamy said something along the line, I'm trying to remember what the comment was, but I mean, it was one of those things where you sit there and go, okay, say the craziest thing. Craziest thing you could say. I had a conversation actually over Labor Day weekend with somebody I consider conservative, and he had reached a breaking point where he found himself saying, I'm agreeing with liberals at this point. Not that he agreed with all sorts of liberal ideas, which he didn't, but of all the things that he could pinpoint as being crazy, out of their mind, it was all coming from the right. And he was like, I don't know if I guess it's just a tactic. We're not even supposed to take this seriously anymore. Not even sure if they take it seriously anymore. But it's, he was like, I can't be aligned with that. I know sure I want to be aligned with, there's all sorts of things I don't want to be aligned with, but I can't be aligned with that. And I thought I was like, good for him. I think he, it's sort of a coming to your senses sort of moment. There has to be a point where it just keeps getting stretched so much where you sit there and go, I just can't do that. I am an independent, and I am to the left to some degree of most Democrats. I was never a fan of Joe Biden. I'm not a fan of Joe Biden necessarily now. I don't think because Joe Biden isn't as strong as I'd like him to be. I'd like Joe Biden to be fighting back hard. I thought Barack Obama had the same issue. I wanted more fight from my guys. We're going to all get along. No, we're not. You're trying to get along with people who do not want to get along with you, have no interest. The Republican playbook at this point seems to be, not only, we'll never make a good faith argument because we don't believe in good faith arguments. Good faith arguments are for suckers. Only a sucker would actually be honest. You're supposed to be screwing the next guy over because the only things that really matter is really money. That seems to be, so you kind of got to fight that. The answer to everything can't be, the boardroom in dollars and cents. It cannot be. That's not the ultimate scorecard. Just can't. All of this, though, reminded me of something. I was reminded, pardon me, I'm banging things. I was reminded me of the importance of a functioning society, and has society fallen apart before? Like I said, I think we're teetering. But has it actually fallen apart before? And how did people react to that, if in fact it happened? Well, of course it happened. Probably the best example is the fall of the Roman Empire. In the late stages, people recognized It was all going down. Now what? The world's coming to an end. Now what do I do? How do I react to it? I want to read you a little something. This is not something I will normally do a great deal of, but this time I want to read you something. And this is from the historian of science, James Burke, in his book, The Day the Universe Changed, which is extraordinary. And this will take a moment, but stick with me. He's going to talk a little bit about the rule of law. Then he's going to talk about the reaction to the fall of Rome, how they could see it coming. At least, the brighter lights, not in Rome, we're a little further away from it, watching Rome get sacked. Now what do we do? There were two distinct directions, and I think you could decide for yourself which is the wiser, or which via history, because we have the lens, we can look back, which of these ideas worked better. There are lessons to history. But anyway, first rule of law, and then on to that. Check this out for a minute. Give me your ears. Burke wrote this: the traffic light turns red, the traffic slows, and you cross the road. In doing so, you express a modern confidence in the way society functions that was generated in Western Europe over 800 years ago. The rule of law regulates every social event and transaction, from international trade and the running of a country to handling private property, planning a career, and having children, and in doing so, it guarantees social stability. Under whatever political system, it sets out to be fair, to treat every member of society as equal, to restrain arbitrary use of power, to punish the transgressor. Because the rule of law exists, and above all because it encourages and it protects acts of innovation with patent legislation, we in the modern world expect that tomorrow will be better than today. At least we did. Our view of the universe is essentially optimistic because of the marriage between law and innovation. Law gives an individual the confidence to explore, to risk, to venture into the unknown, in the knowledge that that person, as an innovator, will be protected by society. In many ways, the purpose of European law has changed little since the system was first established, even though the society for which it was developed has changed beyond all recognition. Modern Western law and the institutions that came with it sprang from a society totally different from ours, with a view of the universe alien to us in almost every way. The emergence of law and the desire to innovate peculiar to Western society began with two men who lived in the 5th century in the same Roman city, both with very different reactions to what they regarded as the imminent end of the world. One of the men, a teacher who had turned Christian, was Augustine, Bishop of Hippo in North Africa. The other was a Roman public official, the lawyer proconsul, let me be sure I get this right, Martianus Capella. The city in which they both lived was Carthage, capital of the Roman province of Africa. For more than a century, Carthage had been the principal source of corn and oil for Rome. The fruitful combination of sunshine and irrigation made the people of Carthage among the richest in the empire, isolated and comfortable in their sleepy backwater, where the calm was disturbed only by the Christians with their obscure sectarian quarrels. The Carthaginians reacted with horror to the news of the sack of Rome in AD 410 at the hands of Alaric the Goth. The barbarians had been looting and pillaging all over the empire for decades, but now that the unthinkable had happened and Rome had fallen, it seemed only a matter of time before the whole gigantic, bureaucratically complex structure of Roman civilization would fall apart and take everybody down with it. Darkness and death seemed inevitable. Augustine's reaction was to offer a way of escape. At the time, the Christian church was much influenced by the thinking of the Neoplatonists, which was based on the writings of Plato. His philosophy was attractive to a new religious sect accustomed to persecution by the state because it made suffering easier to accept. Plato's philosophy drew a distinction between reality and appearance, as well as between opinion and knowledge. The everyday world of the senses was worthless because it was only a shadow of reality, a product of opinion. True knowledge lay in the mind and consisted of the pure ideal forms or ideas of observed things. For Plato, the word table meant all tables, the ideal table, but not any particular table that existed. So all observed tables were merely shadow tables. Only the ideal otherworld table mattered. By implication, everything in the daily life of the Neoplatonist Christian was a shadow of the truth. The miseries and trials he had to suffer were transient, as was all else in the world. The human body itself was a shadow. Only the soul was real, escaping its temporary and irrelevant prison of flesh at death to return to heaven, the ideal world from which it had originally come. So you got to buy all that. Augustine combined these views with the teachings of the scriptures in a book called The City of God, this work, which offered a complete set of rules for living and an integrated structure for Christian society, was to influence Christian thinking for 1,000 years. It showed how, since the expulsion of Adam and Eve from the Garden of Eden, there had been two cities in human society, cities in quotes, one allied to God, the other to Satan. There had been, these had taken the form of church and state. Okay? Augustine believed that Rome had fallen because the Christian church had been subservient to a pagan, secular authority. He advocated the opposite, that the state should obey the moral authority of the church. Sound familiar? Even as he wrote, the Vandals were crossing from Gibraltar to destroy Carthage and bring the end of Roman rule in Africa. Augustine offered escape to a spiritual life in the monasteries. If the world was not worth study, deserting it for a life of contemplation could only be for the good. Belief was more important than earthly knowledge. Credo ut intelligam, understanding comes only through belief, was the creed which would see the monasteries through the dark ages that lay ahead. Wow. Imagine that one. Now, Burke continues. I'm almost done. The reaction of the Carthaginian proconsul Martianus Capella to the fall of Rome was more pragmatic. He saw that the expansive public life of the empire was gone for good. If the Romans were to survive at all, it would be in a very different world. With everything, on a much smaller scale. Without the centralizing influence of Rome, the empire would be fragmented into tiny states and cities that would have to exist autonomously on limited resources. They would need condensed forms of Roman knowledge to help them. So Capella is planning on a practical approach here, where Augustine said, it's all lost, but it doesn't matter. Nothing matters. All that matters is your religious moment. Go to the monasteries, the hills, and have nothing to do with the world. That's really good for the world. Great leadership. Anyway, back to Burke. Such a condensation was Capella's packaged version in 9 volumes of the imperial school curriculum. That course had been divided into 2 sections, the first of which contained all the rules for the teaching of the primary subjects of rhetoric, grammar, and argument. These had been the staple of early instruction in an expanding Roman imperialist society, with a need to win over conquered tribes with oratory, teach them Latin, and formulate complex legislation to hold everything together. To these early subjects, Capella added 4 more from the empire's later years. As Rome grew, it had become necessary to expand the school curriculum with more practical subjects relevant to the day-to-day organization of sophisticated urban life. Music, geometry, arithmetic, and astronomy were added. Boy, no wonder I like the Romans. These subjects formed the advanced studies. Capella's book detailed these 7 subjects, which were known as the 7 liberal arts, together with an encyclopedic anthology of all the facts relating to them. His work was to become standard reference for education for the next 6 centuries. As the monastic communities spread northward in the 7th century, they took Capella's book with them into a world very different from Carthage in its splendid decay. Dark Age Europe was a land of darkness indeed, of almost impenetrable woods in which roamed wild animals, boar, bear, wolves, and men too violent to live in the tiny clusters of huts scattered through the forests. Roman administration had been replaced by small kingdoms of barbarians, but their writ did not extend far beyond the bounds of their encampments among the ruined cities. They lived as isolated as did forest communities. Between the hamlets, the Roman roads crumbled under the onslaught of bracken and bush. With no movement from one place to another, there was little point in maintaining them. The dwindling members of the population subsisted on what they could grow in the forest clearings, or asarts as they were called, which poked like hesitant fingers into the shadows of the forest. Only the well-armed, or those protected by spiritual courage, ventured into the woods. I read all that because I think there's some lessons there, right? I mean, we know. We can look back. Capella had it right. Right? Education was the key. Expanding our mind was the key. Going backwards. Authoritarianism, religious fanaticism, religious views that could not possibly be correct, considering what we know. Right? And in order to go with the vision of Augustine, you basically, again, it's very similar to the argument people are saying today. I don't care what's true. I'll throw it out. I only care what matters to me. Truth is unimportant. I don't care. I reject any truth no. I can't accept it. I only want what I want. In other words, there's a fundamental lack of integrity. I won't believe what is true. I'll believe what I want. I'll make the truth conform to my ideas, not that my ideas will conform to an objective truth, because I don't care about the objective truth, and I sure as hell don't care about anybody else. So, again, these are old lessons. These are things we should have learned, that we should have inside us. And that's why we should know what a problem this stuff is. We should see these threats clearly for what they are. So I'm having these conversations with my son about, one of the things that comes up, he's taking a class about classism. And it's interesting. Look, there was a time when I was growing up, going to college was something pretty much everybody was generally accepted in the society, that was something that you wanted to do. But the squeezing of the middle class, right, the financial squeezing of the middle class, has now meant for at least a generation or so that the advantage of going to college, the better jobs and all the things that come with it, more money. But if you owe student loans for 20 years, now being smarter is a financial disadvantage. Even if you have the better job, you're still paying off the loans. That you'd be better off not going to school, not getting the knowledge, taking a lesser gig, but never having to pay the loans. That's a financial win. I was reading about this recently. It's fascinating. In that, is there? What about the people who don't have the loans? What if you could just pay for college? If you could pay for college, is there an advantage there? Yeah, the advantage, in fact, might be greater than it's ever been for those who could go to school and not have to pay the loans. I'm going to have a moment of full disclosure that I'm slightly uncomfortable with. I'm in a position, and we have been for a while, where we're not going to have to do student loans. We've had the money put away for my son's education. I think he was 4, maybe he was 6, but it's been put away for a long time. We're going to give him every advantage that we can. We're lucky to be in that position. But we're going to do that. That's what we're going to do. He's not going to have that problem. Important to talk to him, though, about something. Couple things take away. One is, a lot of people that are his contemporaries are going to say, man, the system is screwed against me. They're right. It is. This isn't fair. Now, so the classism exists. Doesn't make him a rich kid, because we're not rich people. Billionaires are rich people. We're not, no, but we're okay. We're in better shape than some, certainly. There are those in much better shape than us. We're okay, but we're good. No, we're not the uber rich, So he's got a job. He understands that. But there's a lot of folks definitely worse off than us. And so I was telling him, it's eminently possible that your contemporaries, you're going to have friends of yours who are as bright as you, as talented as you, maybe brighter, and they won't be able to go to school. Is it fair? Nope. Now, he won the lottery. He's been born into a family with not that problem. And again, he wasn't born rich. He wasn't born poor. He was born, middle, upper middle, so that he doesn't have the loan issue that's going to crush him. Okay, so your circumstances are better. Did you do anything to create those circumstances? No, he did not. So you've got should he feel guilty that he has the circumstances? Whoa, thunderstorms. I would argue no. I would argue that he has nothing to feel guilty about. The situation is generally unjust and getting more unjust all the time. And life, as we all know, it's not going to cut you breaks. It's hard. All right, so if you catch a break, you say no to that break. I'm a musician, all right? I'm a survivor. And I know that when you catch a break, you take it and you push it for as far as you can get. And should have no moral compunction about that. In a universe that gives you no breaks, when you get a break, you better grab one. If you catch a break, pedal to the metal, because you're not going to get many. And none of us get many. He has this slight thing that's going to help him financially. That'll make this. He has no reason to feel guilty about it whatsoever. But he should be aware that he got lucky and he caught a break on this one. This will help him. Right? I think that's fair. I think all of this stuff, though, is stuff we got to be thinking about and talking about. I feel that the economic situation is vastly unjust. I think it's terrible how the middle class has been sold out and has been for a couple generations. I think it's absolutely sinful. I think that comes from our country lurching to the right since 1980. Listen to that. You have thunderstorms coming. Serious ones, too. Interesting. I'm not particularly thrilled with any of that. And I will, I fight by voting. But I think these questions are fascinating. I think there's something to talk about. I think there's something to be interested in. Whether we're talking about, I think if we're more economically just, I think the society tightens up and we lean to Capella. I think in our politics that we fight against this barbarians at the gate. It's right back to Rome again. Let's tear it all down. They tore it all down. How'd that work out? The Dark Ages was a good idea. That was good. That worked out really good. So, tearing down democracies, we got it. I think increasingly we are better. I think one of the things this shows is the degree to which there needs to be vast reform here. There's 2 senators in Wyoming and 2 senators in South Dakota and 2 senators in Idaho, and those outnumber the 2 senators in New York and California. We've got to come up with a better system. We need serious reform. I'm for change, but I'm not for tearing it down. I'm for enhancing and making right and making better what we've got, not by tearing it down. Oh well, and I can't depend on the Democrats because they just want to stay still. You've got either an aggressive side or you get guys who, okay, we want to stay still. I'm a progressive. I want to really progress, and there hasn't been nearly enough of it throughout my life. So if I don't have a lot of faith in the political, don't blame me. Hey, I've got one last thing I want to talk to you guys about today, because I see it a lot, and comes from age. Pouring rain is about to start. As you get older, and I'm in that realm, and I'm watching watching this happen to my contemporaries, there is a tendency to not want to change, to just stay still, to say, I've changed enough, I'm not changing anymore. I could go on and on and on about this one. You know what? Our treasured individual past, and it's great. They're great, but you can't hold on to them too much. You gotta let some of that go. The world keeps changing, man. And you've got to go with it. The guy I used to be, sorry, it's dust. You got to keep changing. And I know a lot of friends who can't do it. And wow, cool, man. Lights are going to go out any minute. Videos go on, but the lights are going to go out any minute. It's going to be fascinating. Yeah, serious. Love it, man. All right, so yeah, maybe we'll do a whole episode on that one. But you can't say, well, I've changed enough. This has gone too far for me. I'm just staying in my world the way it was when I was in my 30s and 40s. World don't care. World's gonna correctly sit there and go, oh, they're out of it. They've lost all sense of it. It's okay to be a critic and say that there have been some changes that are not necessarily for the better. That is true. That is fair. And you could be older and say, look, there were times when it was better. That is also fair and also sometimes true. Okay? But at the same time, the world does continue to churn. And you've got to deal with the reality as it is now. This is what I'm going through with the college thing. It doesn't matter that applications were totally different in my time. It doesn't matter. Back then, the SATs were all important. Now the SATs don't matter. Now it's all about the college essay. What about all the people who aren't into creative writing? It's as dumb and as messed up as it was that it was all about the SATs. A snapshot, right? So we've gotten away from that, right? Are we any smarter, really? No, we've just instead of having all the emphasis on something it shouldn't be, we decided to put all the emphasis on something it shouldn't be. I can't fix that, but I've got to deal with it recognize for what it is, and find a way to do the thing that's most advantageous in the situation. So I do believe. Listen, I'm more about philosophy and grand strategies than anything else. But there's got to be a tactical side to it too. I have to live in the world. These are my thoughts for you today, guys. This will be interesting. I have to come up with a title for this. And look, if any of this is fun, get a hold of me, boys and girls. Give me a like, give me a subscription, but definitely give me a like. From what I could tell, the currency of all this seems to be likes. Views maybe, but likes. So if any of this makes sense, give me some, man. I need all the help I can get. I will talk to you guys hopefully in a week. Peace. Remember the Romans. Remember the North Africans. Remember the Carthaginians.